Thank you, Ramchandra Prabhu, for this opportunity to be with these devotees and to share something on this topic of forgiveness. Giriraj Swami just a couple weeks ago spoke also on this topic of forgiveness. I would recommend hearing that. I listened to it also just the other day, and it's a wonderful class. It's on the website. I think it's on your website, Ramchandra Prabhu, correct? So I'm going to speak on the same verse, actually. Prabhupada says that one verse from the Bhagavatam has unlimited meaning. It's not that we hear the verse or memorize the verse and then we have it figured out. But actually there's unlimited meaning in just one verse. So we'll take that same verse and we'll look at it from some other angles. There's one conversation Prabhupada was having, and he was reading Krishna book. And he stopped and he said, if you can just understand this one page from Krishna book, then you can become fully Krishna conscious. And then he said, not just this one page, just this one paragraph. If you understand this one paragraph, you become fully Krishna conscious. And then he went further. He said, just this one sentence. This one sentence, if you understand, you could become fully Krishna conscious. And then it became very mysterious. He said, if you understand one word, just one word, you can become fully Krishna conscious. That's very mysterious, isn't it? And the reason why that's so is because the pure devotee, the words that they're using every word in the service of Krishna. And so even just one word, which is coming from the heart of a pure devotee, in that sound vibration, there's a power to transform you. And so it's not philosophy as we normally understand it. If you open up the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, we shouldn't just think it's philosophy I have to figure out with my mind. It's actually the sound, the vibration is a power. It's called the Chit Shakti. It's actually a power, and if the heart is receptive, that power can transform you. So it's not that your intellect has to just figure out all the philosophy. It's a little bit different. It's by being in the right consciousness. When you hear the mantra, or you hear the word, the sound vibration of a pure devotee, it has the power to change you. It's actually beyond the intellectual understanding. So we'll look at this one verse. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'll read this verse. This is from the 9th canto, if anybody wants to look this up or has the Srimad Bhagavatam with them. But I'll read it in case you don't. 9th canto, 15th chapter, text 40. This is a verse about forgiveness, and two characteristics are given about forgiveness. So I'll read the Sanskrit and we'll go into it together. Yes, let's see here. 9:15:40. Chamaya rochate lakshmir brahmi sori yatha prabha chaminam ashubhagavams tushyate hari ishvara. And the translation is, the duty of a brahmana is to culture the quality of forgiveness, which is illuminating like the sun. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is pleased with those who are forgiving. So I just want to start offering some prayers, and then we'll have hopefully some discussion on this verse, but I'll begin just by reciting some prayers. Umagyan Timarandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raganatan Pitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasade Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So again, this verse, the English translation, the duty of a Brahmana is to culture the quality of forgiveness, which is illuminating like the sun. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is pleased with those who are forgiving. So in the Sanskrit here, two characteristics are given for forgiveness. One is, it says here, yata prabha, which means forgiveness is illuminating like the sun. This comparison to the sun is significant because the sun has a clearing and a purifying power. So forgiveness also clears and purifies the heart so that Krishna's grace can be experienced. Krishna's grace is omnipresent. It's always there. It's always around us. It's always existing. But unfortunately, we've created certain barriers that prevent us from experiencing it. And one such barrier that prevents one from experiencing the grace and mercy of Krishna is an unforgiving heart. If there's a refusal in the heart to forgive, then that will prevent us from opening the heart to actually experience Krishna's grace. Now, some of us, if this topic of forgiveness, you have to be a little careful because not everybody is ready. If somebody has been abused or exploited or hurt very badly, to just tell them to go and forgive, it's a process. They may not be able immediately there, to get to this point of just going to forgive, and it may not be the best idea to even do so. It's a process. It takes a little time. So anybody who's listening, it's not that, forgiveness is actually for all of us to come to this point of letting go and freeing ourselves and opening the heart. But it is a process to get there sometimes. And so don't think that, okay, forgiveness, I got to go and do it. And meanwhile, you were very badly hurt by someone. But still, for those of you who maybe have been hurt in such a way, at least just hear about this forgiveness, this letting go, the possibility. Keep yourself open to the possibility. And we'll see that actually one can get there no matter what's happened, one can overcome it by the power of forgiveness. So, two characteristics, yata prabha, it's illuminating like the sun, which means it purifies. And then this other characteristic of forgiveness that's here in the Sanskrit, bhagavan tushyate, true forgiveness satisfies the heart of God. So nothing ordinary can satisfy the heart of Krishna. Krishna is completely spiritual. So also he can only enjoy what is completely spiritual and pure and clean. So Nothing mundane satisfies Krishna. So this forgiveness that we're talking about is divine. It is godly. That kind of forgiveness satisfies the heart of Krishna. In fact, in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says, Titikshasmi, which means I am forgiveness. So Krishna identifies with forgiveness in the 11th canto. I am forgiveness. So by this we can understand that forgiveness is not just a nice thing we should do, but for an aspiring devotee, it's a necessity. It clears the heart. It's godly to forgive. True forgiveness is actually divine. That's why Krishna says, I am forgiveness. Only this means a very powerful form of forgiveness. Because this is an important point. Every quality we talk about in devotional service, in Krishna consciousness, we talk about so many qualities. Every quality has an original divine form. But just like we fall from the spiritual platform into material consciousness, every quality also is originally divine. But under material consciousness, it has a shadow form. It looks like the real thing, but it's not quite the real thing. For example, in the material world, we talk so much about love. Now, love is a divine, pure quality. What we call love, so long we're under material consciousness, many times it's just an attachment, sometimes an even unhealthy attachment. Or sometimes we're just supporting each other's false egos, and we call that love. So originally it's pure and divine love. But just as we fall, and now we have this material body, material consciousness, so these qualities also take on a different form, which looks the same, but it doesn't have the substance. What is real love? Love is an unconditional force and a desire to joyfully serve God and all living beings. That's real love. That's not a common thing we see. So every quality is like that. So when the Bhagavad Gita talks about, love and talks about tolerance, it talks about humility. There is a real humility, and then there's a humility that we're all displaying in this world, which is not quite the real thing. Humility in our world, sometimes if somebody has a low view of oneself, then they think that's humility. Actually, that can just be false ego. That I wish I was great, but I'm not. So I'm very sad and depressed. It looks like humility, right? You see somebody who's very low, has a low estimate of themselves. This can actually just be false ego. That I want to be great, but I'm not. So I'm depressed and I'm very low and I'll stay in the background. This is not real humility. Real humility is you see the unlimited power of God, and in comparison to that, you feel insignificant, but yet you have determination and courage to take all risks in the service of the Lord. That's humility. Is that a common quality we see in this world? Where you feel insignificant because you're experiencing the power of God, but you're willing to take any risk for the service of God. That is a humble person, actually. So, same thing with forgiveness. Forgiveness right now in our world, we try to let something go, or we forgive because we want to keep the peace. So this is a kind of form, a shadow form of what real forgiveness is. The real forgiveness is unfathomable. It is so pure. It is transformative. If you can truly forgive in the right way, your heart will be transformed. So that is possible. So the question is, right? This is the question that we should be wondering. How to go from the imitation to the real spiritual quality? How do we go from kind of worldly, materialistic humility, forgiveness? How do we go to the real, true forgiveness? Because material consciousness cannot produce, cannot create, cannot manifest a divine quality. So long I'm under material consciousness, I cannot manifest a divine quality. Aprakrita vastu nahi prakrita gochara. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that spiritual substance is never within the jurisdiction of the material conception. So there's the material energy and there's the spiritual energy. And they are separate. So how does one go from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness, to material love, to spiritual love, to all of these qualities that we talk about? What's the first thing to understand to be able to truly forgive? The first thing to understand is that so long I'm under material consciousness, I can't forgive truly. I can't truly forgive in the divine sense of forgiveness, completely letting go. The first thing to understand is that I cannot do that so long I'm under material consciousness. So we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves, because if we're in material consciousness, we're incapable of truly forgiving. But yet, at the same time, we have to want it. We have to want to know how to do so. Okay, I can't do it. I'm incapable. But yet, I need to forgive, and I need forgiveness. So I'm seeking. How is that question I keep asking? We can ask that question through our whole spiritual life. How is it going to be possible to truly forgive? So I wanted to ask a question to all of you, and we're talking about the spiritual level and the material level, and how to go from one to the other. Is there anything in between spirit and matter? Is there anything in between material consciousness and spiritual consciousness? What's the bridge to go from one to the other? Right? You're only either under material consciousness, and then spiritual consciousness has all of these divine qualities and powers.
The body.
The body is
Yes,
in
Prabhu.
between?
Yes.
Ego.
Well, how is that so? We understand the body is material, no?
Right. But that's the one. The body's in between our consciousness, right? I mean, the body's. Well, that's what I thought, Prabhu.
Yes, the body is actually just material. What is it made of, right? Some water, the skin. This is a physical body made of matter, right? And so this is in the category of material, right? So now we have a spirit. We are spirit, but it is covered. It is dormant. So anyone else have an idea of what's in between material? Let's say material consciousness, spiritual consciousness, or matter.
The subtle body.
Three modes of material matter.
Okay, someone said subtle body, right?
Yeah.
Subtle body is also material, even though it's subtle. This mind we have right now, material consciousness, it is a subtle element, but it's subtle matter. Okay, that also is not. That is also completely in the category of material. So now what else? Anyone else?
Three modes, Prabhuji.
False ego.
Modes are false ego is because it's false. It is also material.
The soul.
The soul is spiritual. So again, everyone's pointing out matter and spirit. Is there anything in between as a bridge?
Is it our service and devotion?
Desire.
Okay. So
Duty.
I'll give a hint. If some of you know some of Krishna's philosophy, that Krishna has three primary energies. He has many unlimited energies, but it's also said that three are primary.
Marginal
Internal,
Okay.
marginal, and external.
Okay, so there's the material energy, there's the spiritual energy, and there's what's called the Tatashta Shakti. Tatashta
Marginal energy.
is the marginal energy. It's in between matter and spirit. And that's us. We are in between. We are on the border. And there's a whole a realization of Tatashta, realizing that I have choice, that I'm standing in between two worlds. Once that realization starts to dawn on us, then we can that consciousness, and really because we think we're this self, we think we're this, I was born in this place, this is my background, this is my race, this is my conditioning. That is the material energy. The spiritual energy, who I am as a spiritual person, maybe that's too high for me. But one thing that's possible is to realize that I'm a spiritual being that has fallen into this material personality. Right? There's a verse. Krishna bahir mukho hoye bhogavansh kare nikatastamaye tare japatiye dare, which means that the living being turned away from Krishna and came into this material world and has become attached to sense gratification and has become seized by Maya. Maya has completely controlled the living being because of the living being turned away from Krishna. So when we start to realize this, that actually I am entrapped in the material energy. I'm under the influence of Maya. I'm actually a soul, a fallen soul. But I'm born and I live in a state of darkness, Bhagavad Gita says. And this state is kept alive, this material consciousness is kept alive by pride and by the refusal to forgive. We keep it alive by not forgiving. It's like feeding the false ego, to not forgive, to want revenge, to not allow myself to humble myself, so when we refuse to forgive, it's like we're feeding the false ego, and that false ego will continue to live and will be identified with that. So now if I truly start to see all of this by Krishna's grace, only by Krishna's grace can we actually see from this level of Tatashta, this level of a being that is fallen. I have fallen. And now here I am in material consciousness, totally entrapped. I cannot release myself. But if we start to see that this is actually what's happening, then we'll start to understand myself. I'll understand myself better, and I'll also understand others better, that others have also fallen. And if I can actually see that, truly see that people have fallen into a energy of Maya, then we'll have the power to forgive. Because we see that we're all making mistakes, we're all making wrong decisions, we're all captivated by the illusory energy. And so when you truly see that, this is a kind of Tatashta consciousness. It's not just the ordinary material consciousness that we're identified with this personality, but it's a little higher. It starts to see the modes of nature influencing people. People are surrendered to it, and therefore they're hurting each other. If you start to see that this is actually what's happening, then you'll have the power to forgive. Because you can understand, just like I'm making so many mistakes and I've hurt people accidentally, others are also doing it. Therefore, I can forgive them because I see what's actually happening. That vision is only possible by Krishna's grace. By becoming a devotee, Krishna will give that light into our consciousness where we can actually see that this is the reality, this is truth. And then we'll want to forgive, and with each forgiveness, we'll find that our heart is opening more and more and becoming more and more free. And it's that forgiveness which satisfies the heart of Krishna. Bhagavan Tushite, as this verse says. What kind of forgiveness satisfies the heart? This forgiveness that actually sees the truth and desires to forgive, to open the heart so Krishna can be experienced. So to really forgive, it actually starts with this self-knowledge. And the self, if we need self-knowledge, a lot of people say you need self-knowledge. Psychiatrists say you need self-knowledge. counselors, but their idea of the self is just this mind, the material body, that's the self. And therefore, you never get beyond it. You can work out some problems in your material mind, but you need a full picture of what the self is. And what is the self according to the Vedic teachings? Okay, this conditioned self is one thing, but there's also an understanding of this tatashta, where I am actually a spiritual being fallen into matter. And then higher than that, you can say there's another self, actually, which is a spiritual personality which has a very intimate relationship with Krishna. So yes, this is me here right now, but this is a very temporary personality. This spiritual personality is the real me. So conditioned self, a self that's in between matter and spirit, and then a purely spiritual self. When you understand that whole picture, when you see all of these things, then because one is now in reality, then one can start to learn what it means to actually forgive and how to forgive. So how do we practice this tatashta, living from this tatashta platform? You practice by being the Sanskrit word is sakshitva. You become the witness. You observe. Instead of reacting to all of the things happening in life, instead of being focused on what's happening in life, you become focused on your reactions to life. You just observe, oh, what is my mind doing now? Let me look closely into my heart. What is my motive in this situation? So this is how a yogi lives. It's not so much they get so distracted by everything happening in the material world, right? So much is happening outside of us. All of our focus should not go there. We should be looking at how am I reacting to what's happening outside of me. And then you get self-knowledge by doing this. And you'll start to see and feel this false ego. You'll start to see there's this thing in me that wants to not forgive. There's this thing in me that wants to take for myself. There's this thing that wants to hold on to resentment. And then what happens? When you start to really feel that, then a longing arises in your heart. A longing. You start to long for a change and for Krishna mercy. You see, you won't long in the right way until you really feel the reality of the egocentric life, where I put myself in the center. You have to see how that's actually, I'm always carrying that, but I don't want it. Krishna, please help me understand, show me how to actually live in a pure way. That longing, that desire, that's the first real desire we have. So many desires in this material world, but it's all because of things we learned outside of ourselves. We want this, we want that. Those are temporary things, but the soul wants to overcome material consciousness and reconnect to Krishna. So from that longing, there's a nice verse in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Shikshastakam. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitamam vishame puvam budo kripaya tavapada pankaja stiptaduli sarjasham vichintaya. Where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is praying, the same point we're focusing on. He says, Krishna, my dear Krishna, I have fallen into this material world, into this ocean. Please pick me up, lift me up from this ocean, and place me at your lotus feet. I'm your servant, but I have forgotten that. You see, pick me up. So that's a feeling in the heart. When we start to really observe ourselves, we'll start to see that there is a longing in my heart for happiness, for permanent happiness. But yet I'm in a place where nothing is permanent. So Krishna, what is that place? Please bring me back to your lotus feet. So when we perform our devotional service with that longing, we hear with that longing, we chant with that longing, we serve with that longing. That's the basis. And so then we can, with that longing as the basis, then we want to practice humility. We want to practice forgiveness. So it's this amazing consciousness, because we realize I can't truly forgive because I'm in this material consciousness. But I'm going to go forward and forgive. I'm going to go forward anyway with this longing. Krishna, please allow me to truly forgive. And in this way we hear, we chant, and we practice things in that spirit of longing for the real manifestation of that quality. And from that sincere longing and practice, then we'll begin to experience the reality of God. And that starts to become the only desire we have, is to experience that, more of that. And all of our other desires, they start to fade into the background, they become less important. And then this one desire, this longing that we have for Krishna, becomes the one prominent desire. It becomes everything to us. And by that, once that one desire becomes stronger than the other desires, then you can give up those other things. We always wonder, how am I going to give up these attachments I have? There's only one way to give up. If you try to just stop your certain material attachments, that may not work. We have to try. But the real thing is, when you awaken the attachment to Krishna, the desire for Krishna, it becomes so powerful in your heart, and the taste is so much higher, so much greater, that you naturally will let go of those other things. It will happen naturally, spontaneously, because of the higher taste. Bhagavad Gita explains this. When there's the higher taste, then one can give up the lower tastes. And what is that higher taste? Krishna says, Matpada, that is me. This is the 2nd chapter, 61st verse. Krishna says, I am that higher taste, Matpada. If you can focus your consciousness on me and that attachment awakens, then you'll be able to give up all these other things that are stubbornly, where we have these stubborn attachments that we feel like we'll never get rid of. But we can easily get rid of them if we can awaken the connection to Krishna, because it's such a superior experience. So I wanted to share one story of forgiveness, and then we'll have some discussion, and encourage all of you, any questions, comments, anything you'd like to share about forgiveness. I wanted to share one story. I work in a hospital for 5 years as a spiritual care provider. Hospitals have spiritual care departments. And so I'm often there when people are very sick or dying, and I try to offer some spiritual support, conversation. If somebody is interested in some prayer or sometimes chanting, whatever it may be. So there was one man who came into the hospital, and he had cancer, and he knew he just had a few months to live. And I went to see him, and I said, I am from the spiritual care department. He said, oh, you're exactly who I wanted to speak to. He said, I know I'm going to die soon, but I need something before I die. I need to apologize to my son. I don't know where he is. You have to help me find him. And he shared his story with me that, he problems with his wife, and he separated from his wife, and when his son was young, he kind of left and disappeared. And he said, I've been thinking about, there's not a day that's gone by in my whole life that I haven't thought of my son. But because of the certain circumstances, I could not reach out to him. I could not be with him. And I need to get this off my heart. So please help me find. He just told me where he lived. And I didn't have anything else. I was kind of calling some relatives, and finally I spoke by phone to the son. And I said, your father is dying soon, and the only request he has is to see you. He wants you to come in to see him. And the son said, I don't want to see him. Why would I want to see him? My whole life he hasn't been there, and now, before he dies, he wants to see me. So I told him to just think about it. He was very angry. I said, just give it a little time, give it a little thought. Your father's dying. He told me that there's not a day that's gone by all these years that he hasn't thought of you, and he's requesting to see you. So he said, okay, I'll think about it. So a couple of days passed, and then he called me. I called him again, and he answered, and he said, I am so angry at him, I don't want to see him. I said, well, come in and tell him that. Tell him that you're angry. Tell him why you're angry. Why are you angry? And he shared, because father was never there. I said, well, come tell him. So he said, okay, I'm going to tell him I'm angry at him. And I was thinking, how is this going to turn out? This is not what a dying man wants to hear. But at the same time, it's very real, right? It was something he was feeling in his heart, and he wanted to express it. And at least it brings him there, and we'll see what happens. That's what I was thinking. So his son called me the day before he came, and he said, you know what? I've been thinking about it. My father was not there for me, but I also have a daughter that I'm not there for. I'm just like him. And he said, well, who am I to be so angry at him, and I'm doing the same thing? So he came into the hospital, and when his father saw his son coming in, he'd seen him since he was a little baby, and immediately he just started crying. And he pulled his son towards him. The son now is in his 20s. And his father said, I'm so sorry. Because of circumstances, I have no excuse. I'm wrong. I'm wrong for what I did for not being there for you, but I love you. And I owe that. And the son, they embraced, and the son said, and I want to tell you, who am I to be angry, to hold resentment towards you when I'm doing the same thing? So I realized you couldn't help it. He understood, because of your conditioning, because of the circumstances, you couldn't help doing what you're doing. I sometimes feel like I can't help doing what I'm doing. So he said, I've resented you. I've been angry at you all these years. And I'm sorry for that. I forgive you for what you did to me. The son said to the father, I forgive you for what you've done to me. And the father, the exchange was so powerful, because they're both forgiving each other. The father didn't expect the son was going to say, I forgive you. I forgive you for nothing. And the son was also saying, I'm sorry for resenting you all these years. So what's up? Because both of them cleared their hearts, and when the son finally left, the father was saying to me that God is so kind to me. I was going to die with this heavy thing in my heart, but my son has come. And the son also was telling me when he left, he said that the power of God in letting go of that resentment towards his father, he says he feels completely free. He felt free from anger, from resentment. They both let it go and forgave. And when that happens, the heart gets totally cleansed and open, and one can have an experience of God. You see, that's sincerity, to just admit, I'm wrong. I was wrong. It's very humbling, and when the heart is humbled, it opens, and Krishna's grace can come in. And how much more so for a devotee who has an understanding of these things, that I need to open my heart, I need to forgive, because Krishna's grace can be experienced by that. I want to satisfy Krishna by forgiving. Bhagavan Tushyate, the verse says, that God's heart is satisfied when we forgive. But it's this forgiving with this knowledge, with this understanding, and with the longing in the heart to reconnect to Krishna. When all of those pieces are there, then we'll experience the transformative power of forgiveness. So you can think in your life, a lot of times we hear classes, and we just passively hear the class, and then we think, we wait for something to happen in our life, right? I was hearing classes for so many years like that. I just thought, if I just listen, and then hopefully something happens, something changes. But for those who are ready for it, think about someone, and especially in the parental relationship. Parents going to their children, and children going to the parents. and saying, like the children can go to the parents and say, because our parents are not perfect, so mistakes have been made, and a lot of times we hold resentment towards our parents. Right? But the more we think that, I am also making mistakes. I'm also imperfect. Just my parents have also made mistakes. So let me go to my parents and tell them, I've been resenting you. I have anger towards you. But that's not right. I'm going to let that go. I forgive you for any mistakes you made. And the parents also, for making mistakes, needs to go to their children and say, I was not a perfect parent and I've made mistakes and I'm sorry for that. The reason why this parental relationship is so powerful, if you think about it, a child, we know Krishna is the creator. But in this one life, who's the creator? Your parents, your mother and father have created you, in a sense, right? Not that they're creating the soul, but in this life, they're like the creators. And so when there's resentment in that relationship, it is like a block to experiencing Krishna's grace. So when children have resentment towards the parents, and we all do, and parents have some, have done wrong in some ways to the children, if this is cleared with a humble heart, that it's admitting that one is wrong, one was wrong, you'll see the power of this. So this can be like a task for anybody who's ready for it. Parents to your children and children approaching parents. This is like spiritual dynamite. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of courage to have that conversation, right? To approach and to say this. But I tell you, it is like a kind of, we have our sadhana, daily sadhana and things. It's like taking medicine daily. And some things are like dynamite. Like when you take a great risk for Krishna, or you make a great sacrifice for Krishna, or you go to a loved one who you've hurt, and you can, say I'm sorry, or if you've been holding resentment towards someone, to go there and say, I'm wrong for resenting you. I forgive you for what you've done. You'll see it takes a lot of courage, especially children. We're all children to somebody, going to the parents and saying that I've been angry at you, but I want to let that go and forgive you. So not everybody's ready for that, but you think about your own life, and if you do it from a sincere place, you'll see something is lifted off the heart. And what goes away? Anger goes away. Resentment goes away. Fear goes away. And you'll find that your heart is now more open. So when you chant, when you hear, when you perform service, it goes directly into your consciousness, into your soul. Because some of the things are blocking that. And an unforgiving heart is especially blocking that mercy of Krishna. So I thank you all so much for your attention. I hope something here may have been valuable, just sharing some experiences that I've had, and grateful for the opportunity. If there are any comments or questions, any disagreements, I'd be happy to respond or have a discussion with all of you.
Thank you, Prabhu, for this wonderful story and connecting it with today's topic. One point I would like to make, and also question actually, is that so it's to ask for forgiveness. Krishna is pleased with that person. When you go up and say, "I'm sorry." But even greater than that is when you know that you haven't done anything wrong, but you hurt somebody and you still go and ask for forgiveness. Many times, Krishna is the judge on who was right and who was wrong, because me and you can have different perspectives. You could think you were right and I could think I'm right. But knowing the fact that you know that you were not wrong, but I'm hurt, and you would come up to me and say, "I'm sorry," is even greater than when we know we've done wrong, isn't it? So that's...
It's so powerful, because even without the intention, somehow somebody may get hurt. But if we're so sensitive that we see, well, this person has been hurt, I didn't even mean to hurt, and let me examine. But I also know that my heart is impure and I make mistakes and I've hurt others. So even without the intention, let me go to this person and admit that I had made some mistake and I beg for your forgiveness. See, again, it's so humble. That kind of humility pleases Krishna. And as you're saying, it is a great personality who can do something like that. Because usually, even after we do something very wrong, we have a hard time approaching someone and saying, I was wrong, forgive me. But what to speak of not really being able to see, maybe we weren't completely wrong, or maybe we were unaware, but to have the sensitivity to still see that this person, regardless, was hurt. Therefore, I will go. I will approach them. The whole point of everything in this material world, I asked this question to Radhanath Swami once. And many people in many religions ask, why is there suffering? If God is good, why does he allow for suffering in this world? And Radhanath Swami gave an interesting answer at this point. He said, on this point, he said, the purpose of everything, not just suffering in the material world, is to make you humble, is to humble you. So that when you're very, very humbled in the right way, because again, there's a false humility, which has anger behind it. I'm angry that I've been humbled by the world. You see, that's not humility. Humility means I've been humbled. I've turned away from Krishna, and therefore I take ownership for all the mistakes I'm making, for everything happening. And I look up towards Krishna with that longing in my heart, say, Krishna, please purify my heart so I can return to your lotus feet. You are humbling me and I accept it. This is the key to how to live in this life. How do you suffer? We all have to suffer, but how? We can suffer and become resentful to Krishna. We don't think it's to Krishna, but if you're actually resenting the suffering you're going through, in one sense it's resenting Krishna because he's allowing for it. There's something meant to happen. We're supposed to be transformed. So somehow to suffer with no resentment for the suffering, but to take it as a kind of necessary medicine. It's a process to get there. We don't expect that it can just immediately happen, but it is very, I appreciate what you shared from Ramchandra Prabhu. So I'll just stop there.
Yogi has a question.
I have a comment. Hare Krishna, thank you for the wonderful class. I loved how you explained it, and I really need to work on my forgiveness. So this lecture was very helpful to me. Hare Krishna, thank you for your time.
Hare Krishna, wow, you are so blessed and fortunate that at your age to be hearing about Krishna and these topics, and thank you for your encouraging words about the class. And you're a very special devotee. Thank you.
Jai Draupadi Mataji has a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the class. I came across to the point where you said that like forgiving is very healthy for our spiritual lives. So I was just thinking that like if someone says something to us and then arises the need to forgive, or like anything that happens. So in that case, how do we try to remain unaffected if someone says something or like they don't like us, or either like in any situation? How do we remain unaffected by what others think?
Yes, you know the story of Jesus, that when it's described when he was on the cross, and he was being killed actually, and he also offered up a prayer to God. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, he talks about this quality that you're talking about, how to be unaffected. In Krishna, the way Krishna puts it, but it's the same point. He says one has to see that the modes of nature alone are active. So when a person comes up to you who's very angry and maybe explosive, one has to have the vision to be able to see that this is a soul. This is a soul, a servant of Krishna, but somehow under the influence of the modes of nature, this anger is manifesting. But I will not take it so seriously because I can see it as a kind of, as an influence that's overtaken this person. Of course, we're responsible for surrendering to the modes of nature or surrendering to Maya. So in one sense, we're all responsible for what we're manifesting and what we're doing to each other. But at the same time, we want to actually sees that a person, right? Like if you see a dog that's barking, it's strange to be mad at the dog for barking because that's what dogs do. They bark. We still get mad, right? If the next door neighbor dog is barking, we get angry, but dogs bark. They cannot help it. And people also being surrendered to the modes of nature, will act in so many ways. But if one sees, oh, the person is only doing like this because of the modes that have overtaken their heart, and therefore, let me not take offense. Let me just see that this is what's happening. Again, this is we talked about during the class, this tatashta level, which is when you start to see the modes acting. This is not the ordinary person in this world. They don't see energies acting through people. They just think that person is to blame. They are wrong 100% completely. In a sense, we are wrong because we've turned away from Krishna and come under these other influences. So this is a way that we can be unaffected, is when we see that this person, for whatever reason, they're in a state of mind now where they cannot help but be this way. Let me not take it seriously. Let me not take offense. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Madhav has a question.
Wonderful lecture. Thank you very much. I was just wondering, what if there is ever an instance where, we understand that we must ask for forgiveness. We ask for forgiveness from someone, but still that person is not necessarily willing to forgive. And, we keep on asking for forgiveness, but the other person is not forgiving. In that case, what is the proper action to take?
Well, whenever possible, we should seek forgiveness from others. But as you mentioned, now a pure devotee is in a state of forgiveness. A pure devotee does not take offense. But we're aspiring devotees. And so some people are not able to forgive even when asked of them. Right? So the amazing thing is, you can still find that forgiveness even if a person doesn't give it. Because to truly take ownership and to admit, I'm wrong, if you can admit that even before God, then you can let go of the resentment in the heart. If you can actually let go, it doesn't even require the other person to say, okay, I forgive you. They may not. Someone their whole life, because of their own consciousness, their own impurities, may never want to forgive somebody. So then you might think, well, then I can never get forgiveness because this person's just refusing. No, you still can get it. You still can get it because if you truly feel the wrongness and take ownership of it, then you can be forgiven by Krishna. And your heart can be free. It's not completely dependent on the other person. Now, if you have to make the effort to get forgiveness from the other person, but if, say, somebody has just a angry consciousness that never wants to give forgiveness, does that mean that you're forever trapped? You'll never be able to get out of it? No, you still can get it by Krishna's grace. So the powerful thing is that when you forgive, you can be forgiven by the purity of your forgiveness. So if you think, if I can truly admit, take ownership completely, then you'll see it's not even, because here's another example, right? Say a person you've hurt and you need their forgiveness, but they pass away. What are you to do? Is there no way you can find forgiveness? They passed away. You cannot even approach them. No, you still can get it. You approach Krishna. I'm wrong. I hurt this person. I was wrong. Krishna, please forgive me. You can get it that way as well. So it's not dependent on the person giving forgiveness, although you should always try that, and you have to be determined to try that. But for whatever reason, if a person is refusing to give it, that is not an obstacle to you to having a completely free heart by Krishna's grace if possible.
Any other questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. How do we reconcile a person who has been physically abused, and when I see the scriptural perspective, like Draupadi was physically abused, and in that case she did not forgive. So how do we as devotees, practice forgiveness?
Yes, it's an important point, and that's why when I began also I said this forgiveness is a process. And so if somebody is very badly hurt or exploited or abused, they need help. Actually, what helps them the most, what can help them and soften their heart, is when the person who has harmed and hurt them can go and beg for forgiveness and apologize. But that doesn't always happen, right? But that would be helpful. But that person needs support from other devotees. And they have to at least be open to the possibility that one day they can actually even forgive the person who has terribly harmed them. It is possible. It is a process. Don't think we have to do it immediately, but that person at least has to stay open to the possibility. But as devotees, we should see those who have been badly hurt and be there as for friends, as support. And in this way, by the association of devotees, a kind of purification can take place. And then the person can look into their own heart and say, okay, this happened to me, and it was painful. But if I hold on to hating this person, then I'm only harming myself. So at least, even though the hate is there, and I have to admit, I have to be honest and admit it's there. So if it's there, it's there. You just have to let it sometimes be there. And you have to experience that, and you have to feel it. You're allowed to feel it, because some wrong was done, right? And one was hurt. So you take your time with it, and you be patient, and you experience it. But then if 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, many lives are going by, and you're just not, because I was wronged, I will not let go of my desire for revenge. And one starts to see that, oh, actually, by holding on, I'm also harming myself. So to stay open to the possibility of even forgiving after one has been hurt. It's possible. So when it's very serious, and then we have to be patient, we have to be supportive of those devotees and do what we can to help them. I hope something was useful in that.
Abhay, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for this wonderful class. So Prabhuji, I had a small question. So let's say when you're asking for forgiveness, let's say you hurt this person pretty badly, and this person holds such a big grudge against you, like such a huge amount of hatred against you. No matter what are other people tell that person, hey, it's okay, this many years have passed, why haven't you, why don't you forgive that person? And no matter what you say, they are still like, put upon that idea of, oh, hating this person will solve my problem, or like, deal with my problem. So how can you appeal to them saying that, it's all right, just let it go? So how can we do that? What's the process? So that's my question, brother.
Well, it is a process. So we cannot just push somebody into making a decision to let go. We were talking about in the class that actually let go is not possible in material consciousness. To truly, completely let go. So we cannot expect that. That we can just say, hey, let it go, no big deal. Meanwhile, this person in their heart is burning with anger. People have to have their own realization of how they're not letting go if they're hurting themselves. You see? So no matter what we say, we can't necessarily influence a person. We can say, think about it, meditate on it, and we try, but a person has to have their own realization that by me not letting go of this, I'm harming myself. And when there's spiritual knowledge, as we were talking about, and one also sees that if I don't let go of this, then I cannot experience God. But see, if someone doesn't have that as a goal, it's not so important, right? But as a devotee, we should think, if I don't remove the resentment from my heart, then what will be the quality of my chanting? I'm here trying to chant Krishna's name, but I'm holding this anger, keeping locked onto it. Now I have to let it go. So that becomes an impetus for a devotee. If someone is not a devotee, they have to have their own realizations through life. We can encourage them and be a friend and help, but there's nothing you can actually do to push someone to. You can sometimes encourage and speak and then see how that goes. And if the person has their own realization, they'll see, I need to let go of this. So sometimes you can help like that. But the person has to have their own profound realization of the necessity of letting go.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for that wonderful answer. Bible.
Hare Krishna, I can jump you. This is Ramdas.
Yeah.
It's really, as usual, very wonderful class and very practical. I want to ask this question, as we all are Kanishta, maybe some devotees maybe in different kind of level, but we are practicing devotees and we're just coming to Krishna consciousness. And with this, with so many impurities in us, what is the hope, we can see, as you were telling the story of this father and son, that sometimes when we realize that actually I'm imperfect, and because my imperfection is there, and the other person is also could be his, because of imperfection, his dealing could be wrong towards me. But actually that is very hard to do for us, because of our this the consciousness, the son was taking so heavy in his heart, that this is my father, he's not willing to go. But in the same way, in devotional practice, as we are in Kanishta Adhikari, we have also this because we are not in that particular stage. So what could be the hope, and how we can understand and develop this consciousness that I might have imperfections, and I should really uh, develop that inclination, the tendency to rather see fault on myself, to see fault myself, to not on others, right? How can we develop that heart? Because I think that's
Yes.
the main core element of forgiveness, to see.
Yes, we were mentioning that the real way to forgive, it has to begin not with just trying to forgive, but it has to begin with self-knowledge. It says in the Kathopanishad that the human being, all human beings, their eyes and their senses are all going outward towards the world. But a few intelligent souls look within. This is just a few. The whole world, the senses, the eyes look out, the ears are hearing things from without, the senses go out, the touch, the hands, everything is going outward. But a few wise souls, they are looking within. And so I was mentioning during the class that keeping your eye on yourself, keeping your eye on your motives, the more we look at ourselves, that we start to see, there's anger there is resentment, there is pride. And we don't get depressed over it. You just want to get the information about yourself without harshly judging yourself. So the self-observation should be unemotional. You don't think, oh, there's another fault. Oh, there's another fault. Oh my God, I have unlimited faults. In one sense, just look and see and get the information of how you are controlled by the lower self. And then you understand that just as I am controlled by the lower self, others are also controlled in that way. Therefore, let me forgive. Because I'm now starting to see, by Krishna's grace, I'm starting to see reality more clearly. You see, when the realization comes from Krishna of what's actually happening in this world, then with the realization, one has the power to forgive. Because, we can see in a compassionate way that just as I'm entrapped in this consciousness, others are too. And we're all hurting each other. If you're in material consciousness, you only have two choices of being. There's only two choices. And Prabhupada would explain that. You either be a cheater or you're cheated. You're an exploiter or you're the one who's exploited. In material consciousness, those are the only two options of living. Either you're harming others or you're being harmed by others. Both of them are material consciousness. But when one starts to see that this is actually what's happening, because of material consciousness, because of the false ego, that I'm either going to be a cheater or I'm going to be cheated. So he says in one place that when someone is a superior and they cheat someone who's dependent on them, he says in one place that is the worst sin. For example, when a parent is superior over children and they harm. But he says something very interesting, but to be cheated, to be exploited, that is also a fault. So to be a cheater is a fault. Of course, we see somebody abuse their power. But to be cheated by another is also a fault. That's interesting to think about. That's the only two options in material life. Because of the false ego that's controlled, we're driven by the false ego. Those are the two options. But if you start to come to spiritual life, spiritual knowledge, you see there's another option. I can separate from this whole game, and I can be a loving servant of God and all living beings. So so the more we start to see, we have to hear patiently for a long time the truth. You hear from a pure devotee, and you hear the same thing again and again. Don't think that you already know it because you've heard it a few times. You have to keep your heart receptive and open and be humble. Even though I've heard this so much, I don't know anything. What do I know? My life is the same. And that way, this longing starts to come into the heart when you're hearing, Krishna, please let this truth penetrate to my soul so that I really change my life. When you hear in that way, then everything will start to light up and you start to see Krishna's giving you that understanding and he's giving you the power to overcome the material energy. And you'll be able to forgive and to let things go when people are trying to harm you. You will not get exploited. A person who's in spiritual consciousness cannot be exploited. It may look like it on a physical platform, but they don't have that weakness of being exploited. They're above it. Yeah, I don't know if I went off into a whole other thing, but I'm just sharing some thoughts that came from your question. I hope something was there for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you.
Prabhu, there's a question in the chat box. How do we understand that Chota Haridas was not forgiven by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? How do we understand?
So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, by not forgiving in that particular story or pastime, he was setting an example. Those who are renunciates or those who are on the spiritual path, there should be no hypocrisy whatsoever. So he showed by his anger and his non-forgiveness that this is a very serious offense. Chota Haridas was that he committed. So he was showing by that example that one has to be very careful. But actually, if you continue to read that story in the pastime, Chotaharidas, even after passing away, Lord Chaitanya was coming to him. There was so again, we see on the material level, we think, oh, he wasn't forgiven. And it's very mysterious, but on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, then he attained the association with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu eternally. So even though from one point of view we see the anger and the non-forgiving of Lord Chaitanya, it was a way of teaching all of us to be very careful on the spiritual path, not to take advantage, not to fall to hypocrisy, especially for a renunciant, becoming attached to women and making that a focus. So he was teaching us that you have to be very careful. But at the same time, we see in the end, there are some verses that show that Chotaharidas was protected by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which means he did achieve the eternal association with Krishna.
Any other question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Oh, go ahead, Maji. I'll ask after that.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I have two questions. First is how to keep on forgiving if a family member keep on repeating the same mistakes for which he is asking for forgiveness. My second question is, if you try to forgive but people take advantage of your humble mood, what we should do in that case?
Well, I'll just mention your second question. I'll address that first. So, yes, it's to be a devotee does not mean that we allow others to walk over us. To take abuse or to be exploited is not spiritual. We have to stand up and speak up and set particular boundaries, but we want to do it with no resentment in our heart. So if someone is taking advantage of you some way or exploiting you, we don't allow it. You say that, hey, I see that this is what's happening. But you just have to be careful that when you say it and when you stand up and when you speak up, you don't have hatred for that person in your heart. Because if there's hatred, if there's resentment, what happens is sometimes because of that, we feel guilty and then we'll be afraid to actually speak up. We'll be afraid to stand up because we feel the guilt from the hatred in our heart, the resentment. But if you can let go of the resentment and the hatred, then you can speak anything. You can say, hey, this is wrong. Don't do this. You don't allow for injustices. You speak up with strength, with courage. Set a boundary. Don't allow it. If a person keeps harming you, you get away from that person if you have to, or you speak up to that person. I will not stand for this. You tell them. In this way, you have courage, but you can only have that courage and that self-dignity when you do it without hatred for the person, when you do it without resenting the person. If there's some resentment, then it won't go so smoothly. But once you let go of resentment from the heart, and how do you do that? How do you let go of resentment from the heart? When you forgive, truly forgive another, you can let go of anger from the heart. And by Krishna's grace, when we are empowered by Krishna, one can actually let go of those things. And then you can stand up for yourself, but without hating. So your question was, if you keep forgiving, but the person doesn't change, that's okay. Keep forgiving. The other person is on their own journey. The other person has their own thing. Well, let me see. Okay. No. I'm sorry. So that in reverse, I was thinking asking for forgiveness. That is not the best advice. But from the point of, if you keep forgiving somebody and they keep harming, they keep hurting you in some way, or they keep doing wrong, then it depends on the relationship with the person. If this is like a, we may have to have less interaction. If something keeps going wrong, you do what's very practical on the material level. Do what's practical and necessary. So to forgive another person is always good. But we have to see that, the other person, we cannot control their behavior. So we have to do what's practical and what's necessary for us. Maybe it means, not giving them a chance again and again and again, but without hating them, without resenting them. That spoils everything. So we ourselves have to become free from the resentment. If we're thinking, I forgave this person so many times, they're still not getting it, they're still not changing. So annoying. This person is, such a botheration. It's showing the resentment in our own hearts. And so we have to keep an eye on ourselves again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru. Thank you for the nice class. It's like words flowing straight into my heart. My question is, forgiving, I think forgiving helps me stay peaceful and then focus on my spiritual life. But not being forgiven, say I have dealt with that feeling already, but say somebody's still out there, have been forgiven, but then I've still dealt with that feeling. How does that affect the spiritual life? How does that affect the progress of the spiritual life?
Yes, we spoke a little bit about this earlier. Some people may have a vow that I will never forgive you. So what does that mean for us? Well, there's many factors there. If someone is vowing to not forgive, is it still possible for you to be okay and free and connected to Krishna? Yes, it is possible. It is not dependent. Although we should do everything we can to seek forgiveness, it's not completely dependent on that happening, because someone, again, we gave the example earlier, somebody may pass away who you need forgiveness from, and then what is one to do? So the real solution, no matter what happens, it's not so much about getting forgiveness. If you truly forgive, if you can truly forgive, then you are forgiven. Because to truly forgive another person, and I'm talking about a very deep forgiveness, which really cleanses and purifies your heart. When you forgive, you're letting go of this ego that's driving us. And in that sense, the heart is cleansed by your forgiveness. So if we forgive just once in the right way, in the true way, you mentioned earlier that Krishna in the Bhagavatam says, Titikshasmi, I am forgiveness. Krishna says, I am forgiveness. So that's a very powerful forgiveness he's referring to. When you do it once in a pure way, in the right way, Krishna forgives you, no matter what that person does. Now, if it's a devotee, and we have to, again, we do everything we can to seek that forgiveness. And if a devotee is also on this journey of becoming humbled and loving Krishna, they'll also want to forgive. It's a process for everybody. So, we have to be patient. We have to be willing to say, I'm going to forgive this devotee, and whatever this devotee may or may not give me forgiveness. But that's okay. That is them, and I just patiently wait. Whatever is coming to me is coming to me. Krishna just. So we make every effort we can, but again, the real power of this, because we can't control other people, but the one person you can control is yourself. So if you can forgive another, that can be so powerful that your heart will become, by Krishna's grace, you will be forgiven in your heart, you'll be free. You see, most of the questions are about us needing to be forgiven. But what I've been emphasizing the whole time is that you become the one to forgive another. That itself has a power to free your heart and connect you to Krishna, and you experience Krishna's grace. Because when I forgive, I'm holding on to resentment, you see. So I need to let it go by forgiving another person.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Anyone else? I'd just like to summarize this in the sense that since we're in the path of bhakti, right, we cannot have anger and hatred towards anybody. If we had to go back home, back to Godhead, we have to clear that space for Krishna to come and reside. So, as you mentioned, it'll take time. It's a process, but end of the day, that gradual process has to lead us to not hold grudge against anybody. I mean, otherwise it's just not possible to have Krishna prema. I hate somebody and at the same time I love Krishna. I remember a story where once the Pope was attacked, the previous Pope, I believe, and the person who attacked him or was a terrorist, was caught and put in jail, and Pope requested to visit him in the jail. And he said, I'll go inside alone. And they wouldn't allow him to go in alone. He says, no, I would like to go and meet him alone. And he went in and he embraced him. He said, I forgive you. And this person totally broke in tears by that humility and the complete acceptance of, this person. So it's difficult, but it's possible. It's not impossible.
It's a nice point. We help others so much. We actually forgive. We can sometimes melt their heart, and they'll feel so moved that they also want to apologize for something. You almost have to, if it starts with you, then you'll see that you'll get a certain reaction from the other. And if there's some sincerity there in the other person, they'll also, one quick story I'll mention. Do I have time, Ramchandra Prabhu?
Yeah, please.
A lot of, in New York, not too long ago, a lot of race issues were there, where, racism, and I worked with one African-American Christian pastor. And I was thinking about this topic of asking for forgiveness and resentment and letting things go from the heart. And so, again, to be prejudiced and to be racist, let's say, in one sense, we all have that, to prejudge another person. Again, under material consciousness, we really can't help but do it. So we have to be honest. We can't just say, hey, don't do it. You tell somebody, hey, don't be racist. Don't be prejudiced. We're not seeing how deep it goes when we tell someone just as if you just tell them and they stop. We're talking about a deep-rooted tendency of the false ego, and we're identified with the false ego. So even though most of my life I've I had a certain pride that, African-American people, I have no problem with them, my friends, but I was just examining my heart through all these things happening. And I realized there is some resentment I was finding in my heart. Some things that I saw, some things that I experienced, and I was holding some resentment. And so my friend who's African-American, I approached him and I said, you know what, I always thought that I didn't have any kind of prejudice or anything like that, but I'm recognizing it is there in my heart, and I want to say I apologize to you for that. That I have experienced certain things, and there is some contamination in there that resents and that judges. And so I just want to say I acknowledge that, and I'm sorry. Now, he was shocked that I said this. And immediately, because I humbled myself and just admitted the truth, and I said, he did the exact same thing. He said, you know what? I also have this towards, he was African American, I'm white, so he was saying, I have this towards white people. I also have this resentment towards them. And he said, I'm sorry for that. And so I thought this was very profound, because we both, instead of just saying, don't be racist, don't be prejudiced, we both said, you know what, if I look close at my heart, I have it. Even maybe a little bit, but I have that tendency. And therefore, I'm sorry for doing so. Please forgive me. And I tell you, the next few days, we were always friends, but the next few days, seeing him and him seeing me, I felt like we were like brothers. Because of the honesty that we shared, it felt so natural to be with him. There was no more fear and this awkwardness, this strange thing. We both came with resentment in the heart, with judging in the heart. And we begged for forgiveness from each other. And we both gave it happily. And so I started it by doing it. And then naturally he did it, because he's also a very sincere person. So we both said, I'm sorry, I do this. And this is the real solution to racism and prejudice, is that people have to first admit that they do it, and they can't help but do it. But they want it to go away, and only by God's grace can it actually go away. So if you're not on a spiritual path, to actually remove the judgment and remove the resentment of another person is not possible. So first is we have to admit it's there and ask for Krishna we long for Krishna to take it out. Let me be situated in my soul, which has no judgment, which has no hatred. That's the only way to get beyond this issue.
Thank you so much for sharing. This was a very nice interactive discussion also. And I see that devotees, just hanging in and listening very attentively, and it's really nice. Thank you so much for your time and effort. Hope you can join again, and Alachua is not too far when it's virtual. So we're all happy to have you, and request the devotees to reflect on this topic. It's a very important topic, and it can loosen a lot of weight that we carry in our mind and our hearts. It can become very, very light if we internally take this forgiveness very seriously and just let go and just say, that's it. It could solve many, many mental, physical, health, and spiritual problems that we have. So this coming Sunday, our Sunday class is going to be given by His Grace Vishnu Gadaprabhu. Please join. He's a long time devotee, Srila Prabhupada disciple, and he'll be speaking. It's the appearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur on Sunday. So the glories of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, many of you may not know. It's important to hear them. He was an exemplary devotee, the father of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and how he led his life, balanced his life spiritually and materially, which today everybody has that question, how do we balance our life? Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a magistrate during the British time, and had the highest position an Indian could have during that time. And despite having such responsibilities, how he practiced his spiritual life and also his material responsibilities. And then next Wednesday, for the Wednesday Sangha, we have His Grace Shamik Rishi Prabhu, who's going to be speaking from India, Srila Prabhupada disciple again. So thank you very much for staying with us, and thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu, for a wonderful talk.